Welcome. I'm Dr. Pete Hilgartner, and today I'd like to discuss fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia is a chronic condition that is very rampant throughout our society. However, it's not very well understood. There are a lot of people writing books and come up with treatments and therapies for fibromyalgia, but my experience in my practice is that very few of those actually have any positive effect. They may have some effect, they may help, but they're not solving the problem. And the reason they're not solving the problem is they don't understand the fundamental issue of fibromyalgia. So if we take the word fibromyalgia and we break it down into its definition, fibro refers to scar tissue. Myo refers to muscle, and algia equals pain. Okay, so basically fibromyalgia is pain in the muscle tissue due to scar tissue. So if we understand why and how scar tissue would build up in the muscles and cause pain, I have a whole CD or DVD just on the discussion of pain and this thing, but we're going to discuss it specifically as it relates to fibromyalgia. If we understand this whole mechanism, now we can actually go in and start to solve the problem at the foundational level. So what exactly is fibromyalgia? What are some of the symptoms of fibromyalgia? Again, I said it's pain due to scar tissue in the muscles. Well, what would be some of the effect of that? One, trigger points. We've all seen the diagrams and the charts, and they're rampant throughout all the books. And it was actually, of all the trigger points, and you have to have at least 11 of the 18 types of trigger points in the various parts of the body. And that's fine, but that doesn't define fibromyalgia. That doesn't mean you have fibromyalgia if you have those trigger points. I know a lot of people that have those trigger points if I palpate, and I'll find them, but they don't have any of the other symptoms of fibromyalgia. So it's one of the pieces to the equation. It was actually, that chart, by the way, was simply developed by a bunch of researchers who were looking into this problem, and they needed some way to select the patients. So they said, well, we're going to have them have at least 11 of these 18 trigger points in these 18 areas, and that was just for patient selection. Well, all of a sudden, that became the definition of fibromyalgia. But you will have trigger points. You'll also have significant fatigue. You have reduced exercise resistance. What that means is you're not able to do as much for as long anymore. So what happens now is a simple act of going out and gardening wears you out, whereas you used to be able to garden or play with the kids or do whatever it is you want to do, go play tennis, and you could do that for hours. Now you go for 10 minutes and you're exhausted. I'm going to explain a little bit later why that happens. You have mood swings. That's because the hormones are all out of whack. You have digestive problems. Okay, digestive problems in this, they actually interrelate with each other. So both of these play off of each other. All right, you have decreased oxygenation in the tissues. Decreased oxygenation in the tissues, decreased oxygenation in the brain. A lot of issues going on there. But this is what's going on, and now we have to ask the question, why and how did you develop that? So, if I take it this way, I'm going to explain this, and in the explanation you're going to understand the treatment. Okay? So this is the explanation and the treatment. Number one, we have to look at structure. You will never solve fibromyalgia problem without looking at the structure and solving the structural and mechanical problems. You just will not. Okay? One of the things that I teach my patients is if I'm standing like this and I breathe in and I breathe out and let my body go, nothing should happen. I should just stay like this. So it's a simple equation that your brain is always running. Your eyes want to maintain a level horizon. Your brain wants to keep your body underneath it for maximal resistance and minimal energy output. So, as soon as I go from here to here, not only, and you can see, you can just infer from this position how much stress and strain now there's going to be in all these muscles, all here, all the various muscles of posture. And by the way, where you find the trigger points are always in the key muscles of posture. They're the muscles that keep me upright relating to gravity. So what happens, as soon as I go from this position to this position, I've just lost 30% of my oxygenation to my tissues. If I lose the ability to oxygenate my cells, my brain, and my tissues, all of a sudden I increase inflammatory chemicals. When I increase inflammatory chemicals, I increase scar tissue. So you see how that connection ties in now to the structure, okay? So the next thing we need to deal with is we need to deal with the nutrition. Remember I said that there are digestive and hormonal issues involved, okay? The only way I'm going to correct those is through optimal individualized nutrition. I can't just sit there and say, okay, here's the blanket approach to nutrition that's going to work for every single patient. It just doesn't happen that way. You are an individual who has been reacting to your environment with your genetics, and the byproduct is the fibromyalgia, and it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. Okay? So with nutrition, we may talk about specific diet. We might talk about supplements, specific supplements, and in those supplements may be what I call genuine replacement parts. Think of vitamins, minerals, things like that. But also very critical is going to be enzymes, because we need something that's going to break up the scar tissue. Okay, I have a whole segment just on enzymes. The other piece is going to be exercise. Now, right at the beginning of this segment, I just said that you have a reduced exercise tolerance. You're not able to exercise like you used to, and here's why. Over time, and there's various reasons why this has happened, you have reduced numbers of mitochondria in your muscles. If you go back to 8th or 9th grade biology class, you remember the word mitochondria. The mitochondria, think of them as little factories, energy factories in your body that produce the energy for you to function, okay? Well, if I'm supposed to have 10,000 mitochondria in my bicep muscle, I'm supposed to have 10,000 in here and I only have 100. What do you think my productivity is going to be? Not very much. So this is why, and many of you who are suffering from fibromyalgia have been told, well, you need to go exercise. And you say, well, I feel fine for an hour after I exercise, but the next day I am absolutely worn out. The reason you feel fine with the exercise is you have released endorphins, the feel-good chemicals in your brain. So you feel sort of that exercise high, but you've just stressed the heck out of your mitochondria. And so you don't have the ability to recover as well as you should. So the next day you feel horrible, and sometimes within a few hours you feel horrible because of the reduced mitochondrial load. There's only one specific way to do exercise, and that's very similar to what power lifters do. You have to do 1 or 2 repetition maximum exercises with a very, very heavy weight to stimulate the central nervous system to get the body to start building new factories. And there's a whole exercise physiological science behind that. But if you don't understand the foundational mechanisms involved with fibromyalgia, you're going to miss this piece. And this is what a lot of people are doing. They're going out and they're having people exercise and do all this stuff, and they feel good for a little bit, but they're actually driving the system down into a tighter spiral downward. Okay? So the other thing that happens with the increased exercise is it puts a higher demand on your adrenal glands. Your adrenal glands are what your body uses to resist stress. Okay, so you've heard of adrenaline and epinephrine, norepinephrine. These are adrenal complexes hormones that your body produces as a result of stress or in response to stress. Well, if I'm all of a sudden putting myself, this is actually increasing stress on my body, and if I do that, I keep driving the ability to adapt to stress down, which is why fibromyalgia patients just keep getting worse and worse. And then a final big piece to this is there is a huge emotional component to fibromyalgia. One of the unique things that we find to fibromyalgia is in the history of a fibromyalgia patient, there is more times than not, I think probably about 85%, there has been some significant emotional trauma. And very commonly throughout all the dealing with the patients that we deal with, we'll hear, well, I was fine until my ex-husband or my husband died, or I was fine until my divorce, or I was fine until whatever. And there was a significant emotional trauma. So you have to take into consideration the emotional component and work on achieving what I call emotional release. There are a number of different modalities that we can use in order to achieve this, but it's only when somebody comes in and says, I'm ready, willing, and able to address all 4 of these components that we're going to get any success with fibromyalgia. Now, the one very, very important thing to keep in mind about fibromyalgia, it is a continuous process over time. What we're really dealing with is we're dealing with a system that is so out of balance that it has lost the ability to adapt to the stresses, the normal stresses of life. So it's in a lack of survival or a lessened survival state. So what we need to do is we need to turn that state around so that you become more and more survivable. But this can take us, in order to rebalance the entire system, this could take us anywhere from 2 to 5 years. Now you may think, well, that's a long time. Right. The analogy I use, if you've ever seen the TV show This Old House, you have this beautiful grand house that they take over, and it's been run down for various reasons. And it takes a lot of time, effort, money, planning, materials in order to rebuild that house. But when they get the house rebuilt into its final form, you look at it and you say, wow, that's pretty amazing. Now here's the question I always pose to people. Once you rebuild and renovate that house and you've got it in its perfect form again, how difficult now is it to maintain it? Not very difficult, but you have to maintain it. So that's the big issue between fibromyalgia. Here are some of the critical things that need to be addressed if we're going to actually have any positive effect. Thank you.